Today, as promised, we're doing the cityscape. And again, we're going to be using some molding paste. So if you have gone out and bought some, you'll have plenty of opportunity to use them today. We have the light molding paste, which as you can feel, again, is a lot lighter, therefore will dry a little quicker. And then the coarse molding paste, and you'll feel it, the weight of it is a lot heavier, much denser, and it will therefore take a little more time to dry. So we're going to be doing a cityscape which will give you a sense of perspective, and that's really vital to what we're doing. Again, I've started with a black canvas. I like that. Gives us this great chalk opportunity, which we like too. So I have gone ahead and used some of the gel just because of the drying time, but we'll go ahead and we'll cover that anyway. So just go ahead and imagine that I haven't done that. This is also a great painting to do if you're going to repaint over a painting. You may pick up some of the other textures that are under there too, and it'll kind of make for a really interesting city scene, and especially the water and light effects down the bottom. So let's talk a little bit about perspective. The cityscape is a succession of buildings coming into a vanishing point somewhere down in the middle here. The problem is that we still want some buildings here, so it's not going to come to a definitive point. That point is actually back here behind the canvas because we're kind of going over and behind. We're not looking for everything to come to one tiny little point here. So we have to kind of keep in mind that that is back here, which gives us a window of maybe about an inch in this case. So somewhere in that inch back there is the vanishing point. And that's how we're going to kind of be thinking about it as we draw it. So I'm in the scene. So I know that the pavement comes off to the side, heading up towards that point. So let's say the point is there. All of those pieces should come back in, but it's going to be so far behind that I'm giving myself that 1 inch place for them all to come to. Now I'm just going to get rid of a couple of those lines that I don't need by using my magic water brush. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to start to block in the buildings and have some fun with this. You know, you can have a building off to the side, and maybe there's one in front here, and maybe over here there's a little shop in front of that one. If you have some photos of your favorite city, bring those in and maybe utilize some of those. Simplify it though, simplify for this particular point. Just because I have this line drawn, it does not mean that all these buildings need to kind of come up to that line. They need to follow that in the sense that by perspective, they're not going to go past that. Does that make sense? They're going to get smaller and smaller down into here. So this particular piece is not a lot of definition down in here where it's dark. The reason is because it's a rainy day, the sun is kind of sitting back in behind, and so there's a lot of internal shadow being cast from building to building. So we're not getting a lot of shadow down, sunlight I should say, down in here. So let's put a couple of buildings here. One of the things you also might find yourself doing is kind of copying this side to that side, and it's a very rare city indeed, I think, that has the same buildings on each side of the street. So you kind of want to see what you've done here. Take those off. Remember that there sometimes in a city you'll see a building, and then in the distance there may be a taller building behind it. So that helps to add to that multi-level or layer. Again, you can do a few of those, but don't get too carried away at this point anyway. Just kind of keep it reasonably simple. See, I've made a big jump here because it was starting to look too staggered, too unnatural. And it can look a little bit unclear down in here because as the distance grows, it is going to look a little more unclear towards that area. It kind of helps to add to that. So some of the buildings can have a more vertical line, and then others will have more of a sloped line depending on which part of the building you're looking at. So we're just kind of grazing these down. That's going to disappear there. And there's a little piece, a little shop front here. and I'm making it up as I go along. So that's my cityscape that I'm going to be painting today. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this lightweight molding paste, or you can use the coarse, whichever you have, and I'm going to use my spatula. I don't really need anything in the sky. The sky doesn't need to be textured so much, but I might put a few ridges in here and there to emphasize maybe a rooftop or some windows. I can also put, it's definitely important in this particular case to put some in on the ground here. And we're going to go ahead and put it across like so. And I'm going to scrape it across and leave little ridges in it too. And then I also want to put some down here on the sidewalk as well. It's hard to see with the chalk. Okay, a couple of other places. It's up to you how much of this you use, or if you use any at all. You may not want to. You may want to try the cityscape without the texture. It'll work fine just as well. The reason I'm using it here, it'll work without it as well, but just a lot more emphasis on the light reflections, because that's what tells us it's a wet street. So by putting it in this direction, the horizontal direction, my brush stroke is going to be vertical, and that's going to catch and break up, and that'll give it that kind of broken, watery effect. So while this is drying, we're going to go up here to our sky. All right, I'm using a number 8 bright. This is probably because of the size of canvas I'm using. If you're using a bigger canvas, go bigger on the brush. Make sure it's slightly damp. Now, I'm using a yellow sky, but again, rainy day means it's not really a bright sky. So I will start with a little bit of a brighter yellow. That's the light yellow cadmium. And I'm going to dull it down a smidge with my yellow ochre. And what makes this sky interesting is that it isn't all just a solid color. So I'm going to put this in, and it helps to define my buildings. Really soft, short strokes, laying the color in. Very short strokes, I'm not sweeping. It gives it that kind of broken, rainy, misty kind of day look. Again, picking up some white and a little yellow ochre now, dulling it down even more. My goal is to get it fairly light to almost a white as I come towards the center. In this case, I might also pick up a tiny bit of orange, really little. I don't want to make it too cheery, and kind of run a little bit of that through it. Some more yellow ochre. So even when I go back over the places that I've gone, I'm still just laying the color on and short strokes. Yellow ochre and white now. As I come on down. You can leave parts of the black showing even in the sky. Kind of adds to that atmosphere. And a little bit of white, again, getting whiter as I get to the bottom. So let's just head on down there. Come on up. I'm using my brush almost on a chisel edge against the buildings. And there you go. There we go. And in order to make this diffuse into the next color, I'm pulling and lifting off as I pull my brush away, and then that lets that color kind of move up into the other color without there being a solid line of change of color, which we don't want. Cool, there we go. So I have a little bit of white and that left on there. I'm going to go ahead and put some of that on over the top of these colors because it is a little bright for such a rainy day. So see, by putting the white back over the top of it, it just softens that ever so much. It's still a little bit wet, so it blends a little quite nicely with it. I didn't have to mix up a whole other color. There we go. Now that's looking good. So what's happening in the city is that a lot of the sun or the light from, when a cloud opens up after it rains and you get all that light on top, it can be quite blinding. So all the colors that we're going to see are essentially in the upper 1/3 of the buildings. If you take a good look at it, all the bottom thirds is almost black and brown. It's just very dark. And the only color we really see reflecting is in the street. So let's start up here. Again, we really have to be careful not to copy from side to side. We don't want a yellow building, you know what I mean? We want to vary it up a little bit. I'm picking up that yellow and white mix, and I'm going to start in here. I'm dragging down. Now this is I guess the thing that we're going to practice the most is lifting the brush as we finish a stroke. So I'm coming in, I'm cutting, I'm pulling down and lifting. And see how it breaks right here and lets that really nice diffused color come through from the bottom. I'm going to go right down the edge and lift. Go down the edge and lift. And we have it broken up already. That's great. Okay, I like it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up a little white and just lay that on top of that a little bit. Now I have that little sunshine feel going on. I'm going to pick up some yellow ochre and I'm going to introduce the raw sienna to that. And I'm going to come in here. It's just a little bit lighter than the black, but that's all I need on a rainy day. I might put a little bit more of the brown with that, because as you get closer to the viewer, it is in fact a lot darker. So I'm going to put some of that there. And I have a turquoise on my palette this time. The turquoise mixed with a little brown. It really makes a lovely color. It's a good patina color, actually. I'm going to put a little bit of that on this building. And maybe a little bit further down in here. And then I want to pull that color up over into here. So I'm actually going to go across onto this one. Yeah, I'm putting it down and lifting as I come down there. Cleaning my brush, taking a look. I want to put a couple of other colors in here. So here we are with yellow ochre and brown again. And I'm going to cut across here, pull that down, leave some spaces for windows. And anything that feels like it's too jolly and bright, I can cancel out later when I put some black back in. I'm going to pick up straight white. I'm picking up straight white, but what's happened is I didn't clean my brush properly, which is intended, just saying, so that underneath all of those colors will come through if I want them to. And we'll put some of those colors, a little bit of brown back in, down into the background, and patina there, and a little bit of a blue, black, brown here. Just really dull change. So it looks like something is there and there. Of course, you can get as complicated as you like, but we're trying to do a little sort of intermediate beginning class right now. So now what I want to do back in here, you can use the same brush or you can use the smaller one as well. We're going to create a little bit of the scenery in the background to give us a little credibility. So I'm going to use this brush on a slicing motion with the ultramarine, not ultramarine, the raw umber. And I'm putting a few little building type things right in the background there. So you can, maybe there's a church spire or something in the background. Great. So now what I want to do is over the top of your texture that you've created here, go ahead and put the black back down and a little brown in the black will be nice. Make it a warm black. A little bit of black raw umber right there. And now I'm going to take, you can get a 0 or 2 bright, or in this case I'm using the round brush, and I'm going to take my black, and you can touch a little bit of brown into that, and we're just going to imply windows. So just little dashes. Thing to remember though is, generally speaking, the windows do fall right under each other, and there are the same number on the way across. So it's not something you can kind of just throw any old thing in. Does not mean by any means that you need to include all of them. In fact, it's probably better that you don't. And you can put a little dark line underneath any kind of architectural point. And I think we'll put, don't worry about windows too far back. Too much detail too far back doesn't make sense, and it also pulls the attention away from the focus, which is right up closer to you. And you really don't see a lot of detail in things far away. It kills the credibility of the distance for sure. As the windows get closer to you, of course, they'll be bigger and more defined. And you may actually, in this scene, you might have some buildings that have the lights on. So in that case, you can use white and yellow. We're going to start to brighten it up a little bit with that yellow, light yellow, cadmium yellow, but you want to have more white in it than yellow at this point, because we want to save our really bright yellow for the umbrellas. There's a couple there, and maybe this sky over here has a few lights on. Starting to look a bit like a city scene, I think. Great. All right, so we have texture on here, and usually the texture medium will dry white. So we want to just go over it one more time with black, just to make sure that we're getting rid of most of the white. There we go. Lovely. Okay, so while that's drying, let's pull some of this deep shadow back up in here that we may have lost. And in this case, again, I'm going to use the raw umber with the black, and I'm using a larger brush this time. You can use the 8 or the 10 bright, which is the shorter straight across brush, and I'm just integrating the darkness of the city. And see, that comes across as a little bit of a glaze over some of the colors that you've put. So if your colors seem to be too bright, then use this brown black glaze to just make them push back a little bit more like a night scene. Break it down with just a little bit of water, not a lot, just to kind of push that back up into those buildings. All right. So while we're waiting for the texture and the black here to dry, I'm just going to put something in here, maybe a sign, a bright neon sign would be fun. So we could either use the orange or the red. I'm doing a little bit of both. And I'm going to put the word city here. You can do it freehand, or if you have a stamp, you can use that too. And but I don't want it to be too obvious. So you can blot it with your finger, or you can take a paper towel, even a moist one, and just push into it a bit and pull off, and see it pushes it back a little bit and breaks it up. So now we're going to be putting our reflections in. So it has to mimic the reflections that we have there, not precisely, but just those colors need to be put in down here. What I want to do is have most of the white here, because it's going to reflect from the sky. And then I'm going to be pulling in some of my turquoises and yellows, and even maybe a little bit of brown. So let's put a little bit of brown up through here. Now you can't see that really on the black. So what will happen is when I pull my turquoise, now I didn't clean my brush completely. So there is a little bit of brown in there, but when I pull the turquoise down, it's brighter than the building. And it's just going to come down and blend in with that brown. So here's the technique. You're going to load the brush on one side. In this case, I'm using the turquoise. My brush is loaded just on one side. So I'm going to come into the canvas, not straight at it as though painting, but flat against it. What will happen is, as I brush, whether there's texture or not, my bristles are going to open up and deliver the paint in an uneven way. So let's see, there's a little turquoise building here, so I can be safe to put a little bit there. Okay, so now we're going to be adding the yellow. So I will still tone that a smidge with white, because I still want my yellow umbrellas to be brighter. Again, coming down, there's a yellow building here. And then I will also put a bit of yellow here, just a smidge. See how it lightly breaks up with that texture? I just love that. And kind of a little bit there, just a small amount. Wiping my brush off, I'm going to just pick up white. And I'm going to place that mostly down the center. And then a little bit here. And maybe there's a building I really can't see, but I do have a white building there, so that's conceivable. I'm going up towards the back there because I'm seeing the top of it here. It's kind of just a matter of kind of thinking it through a little. And a little bit of white there. So I also may see a little bit of light hitting the pavement. And not too bright, just a little bit. So let's smudge that a bit. And I kind of think, again with the smudging, I'm going to add a little brown and soften that white down a little bit. If anything pops out like it's just too much, then it probably is. So go ahead and decrease that. And then just to add that final touch of color, we're going to put some people who are out and about. And so what I'm going to do, you're not going to see the figures so much, but I still want to put them in. And I'm going to put maybe over here on the pavement a round head, and then a kind of a long triangle, and then their body. And now the reason I know that they're there, what it gives me the opportunity to do is put a little bit of black, then with my finger I'll pull down. So if it breaks in through the middle of that blue, you'll kind of get a sense that there's somebody there, because we're going to put a red umbrella there and there too. So let's put a couple of those in place, kind of running through there. And then I'll have 3 umbrella people on this side, and not equally spaced. They're probably close, almost close together. Maybe they all just cross the street at the same time. And then a couple on this side. You don't want them too close to you, because if they're too close, they're going to have to be a lot bigger, and it may not work for you to do something that big in your painting. I'm picking up the bright red, and I'm going to have 3 red umbrellas, 1 on this side and 2 on that. So just over the top of that person's round head, I'm placing an umbrella shape. It's really not important that it be a perfect umbrella shape. So I'm using very short strokes. Don't create that perfect umbrella. Go short strokes so it breaks up. We're looking at this through this rain, having broken up light sort of feeling. So we want to really recreate that. Remember, the umbrella further away is going to be smaller. And again, if it looks too perfect, do break it up a little. And then this guy here also has a red one. So they had no sale on red umbrellas apparently. And the other 2 had gone to the other store and got yellow ones. So there you go. You might need to put a little bit of white with that. And we'll put the yellow in. See how limey that looks? It looks really kind of citrusy. I don't like that. Sometimes if a yellow does that, it can be the wrong tone for the painting. So put a little white in there, just to tone it down a bit. And this guy here too. All right, so we have those. We sort of put that down here where the yellow umbrella is. Reminds us where the guy is. And then the final would be the red, a little bit red down here with that umbrella. Again, I'm not trying to mimic a red umbrella. I'm just putting some broken red light down in here so that you know that that's where they sit. And you can smudge that a little bit and soften it so that it's not too equal. The brightness should be up here. There you go, our cityscape. So we've used lots of texture. We've used a very limited palette to create this. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you practice it again. Try it without texture this time, and change up the city. Find some great reference photos from your last trip to one of the cities closest to you, and try this piece. I think you'll enjoy it over and over again. Before you know it, you'll have a series. Thanks very much for watching. Now, if you'd like to take a class with me on Zoom, you can sign up on my website through the link in the description below this video. And if you've enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate any support you can lend us through our Patreon, also in the description below. Because it's through the sponsorship of viewers like you that we can continue to make the show, and every little bit helps. So thanks again, and we will see you soon.